It's 6 p.m. on Thursday here in Korea. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Hwang Ji-hye. These are the top stories we're following at this hour. President Park Geun-hye met with the ruling party leadership today. There they discussed ways to boost the economy and special pardons for business tycoons. Japan's lower house approves a controversial set of bills that strengthen the role of the country's military. Massive protests against the move take place in Tokyo. And the two Koreas opened their first talks in more than a year to settle a months-long wage row at the joint Kaesong industrial complex. In a sign that the presidential office and the ruling Saenuri Party are working to mend ties gone sour over disputed revisions to the National Assembly law, President Park Geun-hye invited the party's new leadership to her office today. The meeting comes as the president tries to speed up her drive for economic revival. Choi You-sun starts us off.
Congratulating the ruling Saenuri Party's new floor leadership, President Park Geun-hye said her office, the government, and the ruling party must unite to tackle a number of reform tasks at hand.
지난번에 공무원 연금도 그런 필요한 교육 과제 중에 하나였지만 그런 과제들 또 노동 교육이라든가 이런 것을 잘 실천을 해서 경제를 살리고 더 나아가서 경제 재도약을 이룰 수 있도록 그렇게 이끌어 주시기를 바랍니다.
She also urged the party's new leadership to put the public interest first. While pledging its full support for the president, the party said it would do its best to pass a bill for a supplementary budget through parliament during the current session. The budget aims to help people affected by the MERS outbreak and a recent drought. The ruling party also said it will resume dialogue with the presidential office and the government soon.
We reaffirmed that we can only gain the public's trust when we communicate and unite in moving in the right direction.
The communication channel was severed for several weeks amid controversy over revisions to the National Assembly law that would have given the parliament the power to request changes to ordinances. Concerned about the bill's unconstitutionality, President Park vetoed it, slamming former floor leader Yoo Seung-min for engaging in politics for his own personal interest. Meanwhile, the party asked the president to pardon some of the country's business leaders around the time of Korea's Liberation Day next month. The party cited a need to encourage corporate investment to revitalize the economy. In a display of faith, President Park held a separate one-on-one meeting with party leader Kim Moo-sung. While the presidential office and the ruling party managed to patch things up, a tripartite meeting with the opposition party leader may also resume after the president agreed to consider that prospect. Choi You-sun, Arirang News.
Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe's push to boost the role of the country's military has taken yet another step closer to becoming reality. Its lower house approved a set of security bills today despite growing public opposition. Kim Ji-yeon reports.
Japan's lower house of parliament has approved new legislation that could allow Japanese troops to fight abroad for the first time since World War II. The package of 11 security bills would enable the Japanese military to aid an ally under attack. The legislation will now be put up for a vote in the upper house, which has 60 days to approve it. If no action is taken, the lower house can push the bills through with another vote to make them into law by September 27th, when the current parliamentary session ends. Supporters of the bill argue a bolder stance is essential to meeting new security challenges, including a rising China. The bill's passage comes amid mass protests in Japan and a dent in Prime Minister Shinzo Abe's approval ratings. Organizers in Japan say an estimated 60,000 protesters rallied against the legislation, fearing the country will be dragged into U.S.-led conflicts around the world. Demonstrators say the revisions could violate Article 9 of the country's pacifist constitution, drafted after Japan's defeat in World War II. The development is of particular concern to Korea and China, who both say Tokyo hasn't shown any genuine remorse for Japan's imperialistic aggressions during wartime. Meanwhile, Abe's disapproval ratings in Japan rose 5 points to 42% in an Asahi Shimbun poll released earlier this week. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
The two Koreas just finished a second round of talks to resolve a series of issues at the inter-Korean Kaesong industrial complex. A unification ministry official said a long-standing wage hike dispute is at the forefront of discussions, along with ways to improve working conditions and customs procedures. These are the first government-level talks between the two Koreas since June last year. Tensions between the two Koreas have been on the rise since February, when Pyongyang unilaterally raised the minimum monthly wage for around 55,000 North Korean workers by a little over 5% to $74. Seoul rejected the move, calling it a breach of a 2004 agreement stipulating the two sides set wages together. In late May, the North accepted the South's tentative offer to pay wages at the current level of a little over $70, buying the two sides some time to resolve the issue. We move on to the groundbreaking Iran nuclear deal agreed this week. Speculation was high about the possible impact it would have on relations with North Korea. Connie Kim reports on the prospects for the regime's nuclear weapons program.
Experts say Iran and North Korea are in different stages of nuclear weapons development. North Korea has carried out 3 nuclear tests and has the ability to produce highly enriched uranium. Iran, on the other hand, possesses low-enriched uranium and is in the early stages of nuclear weapons development.
In a capitalist country like Iran, the economic sanctions on the country may have played a big role in its decision to curb its nuclear weapons program. While in Pyongyang's case, sanctions against the regime have had little effect on its reclusive economic system.
North Korea shows no signs of coming back to the negotiating table after it walked away from the 6-party denuclearization talks in 2008. What's even more concerning is that the regime claims it has the capability to miniaturize warheads small enough to load onto ballistic missiles. To bring about progress in the long-stalled multilateral talks, the consensus seems to be that inter-Korean talks are the first step.
Experts in Seoul say improvements in inter-Korean ties are critical in laying the groundwork for a breakthrough in North Korea's nuclear weapons program.
Showing flexibility in inter-Korean relations by providing humanitarian aid or starting exchanges between the two countries could open up the doors for talks.
Experts also note, however, the importance of a summit between Seoul and Washington scheduled for later this year. The last time the two leaders met, they say the pressure on Pyongyang to denuclearize increased, which in turn led to a deterioration in relations with the regime. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
And with the deal, Korean companies are betting that business in Iran will pick up soon. Shin Se-min reports on the potential impact of the agreement on the local economy.
Korean firms are gearing up to resume their business in the oil-rich country now that the Iran nuclear deal has passed the first hurdle. Data by the Korea International Trade Association shows that the trade volume between the two countries peaked in 2011, but fell after stifling economic sanctions were imposed in 2012. The biggest beneficiaries in Korea are expected to be in the shipbuilding, petrochemical, and construction sectors. And Korean builders are hoping to be the biggest winners, as Iran was their 4th largest offshore market before the sanctions were set.
With the normalization of the economy there, Korean firms could construct a $43 billion market, thanks to the good reputation they've built.
Auto parts, home appliances, and cosmetics are also promising export items. Korean products took up nearly 70% of the Iranian home appliance market last year, thanks to a lifting of sanctions on some consumer products.
The Iranian government fostered domestic industries like automobiles, which eventually boosted Korean exports of auto parts and steel plates.
The world's 4th largest oil reserves is expected to gradually ramp up production, pushing down global oil prices and eventually helping shipping companies save costs. But experts say companies shouldn't get too excited just yet.
Currently, the trade volume between the two is less than 1% of Korea's total trade. So the prospective companies should look to advance uninhabited industries in the Iranian market.
The government has vowed to support Korean firms by setting up a help center and keeping close tabs on the market, as the competition for contracts and lingering economic uncertainties could put local companies at a disadvantage. 신세민, Arirang News.
The Asian Development Bank has slashed its growth forecast for Korea. In a report today, the bank said it expects the Korean economy to grow 3% this year. That's down from its previous outlook of 3.5%. The bank also revised down its projection for next year to 3.5%. The report said slower than expected growth in China and the U.S. will have a negative impact on Korea, an export-driven country. Korea's exports have slumped for 6 straight months through June this year. Greece's parliament has approved tough economic reform measures that are needed to secure a massive bailout from the Eurozone. But as our Handaun reports, the vote split the ruling Syriza party and was held amid violent anti-austerity protests.
229 lawmakers voted yes, 64 voted no, and 6 abstained. Therefore, the bill was passed by majority.
The Greek parliament gave the green light to harsh austerity measures early Thursday local time, opening the doors for talks with its Eurozone partners to secure a new bailout package of up to 86 billion euros. The measures passed include tax hikes and an increase in the retirement age. Prior to the vote, Prime Minister Alexis Tsipras made a passionate appeal to Parliament, saying there was no other choice to avert economic collapse.
I will admit that the measures we are tabling are harsh, and I don't agree with them. I don't believe they will help the Greek economy, and I say so openly. But I also say that I must implement them. That is our difference.
But he failed to convince the hardline members of his own party, as half of the no votes came from the ruling Syriza party. Deputy Finance Minister and Syriza member Nadia Valavani resigned in protest. Ahead of the vote, thousands of Greek citizens took to the streets in Athens to protest the measures. Police responded with tear gas as the demonstration turned violent. Unions and trade associations representing public workers went on a 24-hour strike. With a go-ahead from Parliament, Greece and Eurozone finance ministers have already begun talks on the urgent matter of providing Greece with short-term loans and setting a schedule for further negotiations. Handaun, Arirang News.
More astounding photos have been released of the dwarf planet Pluto. Thanks to NASA's New Horizons spacecraft, Pluto is no longer a bunch of blurry pixels, but a real visible world that has scientists tremendously excited. Son Jung-in has the details.
NASA has unveiled new close-up and crystal-clear photos of Pluto less than 24 hours after the agency confirmed its New Horizons spacecraft successfully completed its flyby of the dwarf planet on the edge of our solar system.
Today, the New Horizons team is bringing what was previously a blurred point of light into focus.
The first high-resolution image that covers less than 1% of Pluto's surface shows a dynamic landscape, including mountains estimated to be 3.5 kilometers high. The close-up image doesn't show any visible impact craters, leading scientists to believe the surface is around 100 million years old, very young relative to the rest of the solar system, which was formed about 4.5 billion years ago. The photo also suggests Pluto is geologically active and is being sculpted not by outside forces but by internal heat. But the more surprising discovery is that the mountains are thought to be composed of frozen water instead of rock as previously assumed.
And we see water ice on Pluto for the first time. We can be very sure that the water is there in great abundance.
New Horizons also sent a new image of Charon, Pluto's largest moon, and a low-resolution image of Hydra, one of its small moons. NASA says it will spend the next 16 months analyzing the thousands of images that New Horizons will be transmitting back to Earth and releasing both images and scientific observations along the way. Son Jung-in, Arirang News.
And now for a quick look at the weather. Coastal areas will be hit by high winds and waves through Saturday as Typhoon Nanka heads toward the Japanese island of Okinawa. High wind warnings have already been issued for Korea's port cities and islands, and people heading out to sea should beware of heavy fog in addition to the wind and waves. That's Korea for you. Here's a look at the weather around the world. And that brings us to the end of our newscast. More updates coming up at 10 p.m. Korea time. Stay tuned and thanks for watching.